I am standing at a concert, shoulder to shoulder with 200 rabbis and Jewish educators, listening to a 25-year-old Israeli woman reflect on Israeli society post-October 7th. She begins to conclude her remarks by reading the famous Israeli poem, The Silver Platter, a poem written decades ago, all about the birth of the state of Israel. And as she comes to the ending stanza, she begins to read. In plain sight of all, she says, a young girl and boy dressed in battle gear and dirty, shoes heavy with grime, on the path they will climb up. The dew of their youth is still seen on their head. Then a nation in tears, amazed at this sight, will ask, "Who are you?" And the two will then say, with a soft voice, "We are the silver platter on which the Jewish state will be given." But she can't read the last line because she's crying too hard. Because it is her friends who are fighting and her friends who are dying. And someone else on the stage has to finish it for her. I'm sitting in a lecture hall listening to a conversation with Rana Fahum, former superintendent for all elementary education in East Jerusalem, former CEO of the International YMCA, and current member of the Arab Cultural Committee. She is talking about how angry she is at what is happening all around her right now. And she is talking about how devastated she is that she is still angry. How can we still be here, she says, in this time loop? I am gathered in a library with a small group of rabbis. We have been given the enormous privilege of a private audience with Rachel Poland Goldberg, mother of Hirsch, who is a hostage in Gaza. On that day, it was 289 days. On this day, it is 293 days. And by that day, she has learned how to be calm and controlled in front of people as she tells her story of October 7th and of learning that her son was taken. But when someone asks her how she has the strength to advocate every day, her facade drops, she tears up, and she looks directly at all of us and says, as clergy, I hope you understand that on many mornings, I get up first and yell at God. How could you let the world continue again today while my heart remains in Gaza? I am living on a different planet, she says. But the rest of the world keeps going, and so I have to find a way. It is Saturday night, dark, in Jerusalem, and I am standing in a huge crowd of Israelis. They are marching and chanting and yelling and waving Israeli flags and listening to inspirational speakers far ahead of us. And as the formal program begins to wind down, they chant in unison in Hebrew, "We want the country we were promised, and this is not it." For the last 5 weeks, I've had the privilege of living and learning in Israel, primarily in Jerusalem, but I also spent some time traveling to Tel Aviv, and yes, to what Israelis call Otef Aza, the Gaza envelope, the approximately 7 kilometers around the Gaza border. where much of the violence on October 7th took place and where you can still clearly see and hear the war happening, sometimes just a few hundred feet in front of where you are. Israel is still beautiful. The sun still lights up the Jerusalem stone. There are colorful flowers and many colorful cats all around. There are people in restaurants. There are a handful of tourists in bars. And there are crowds going to concerts. And yet, as I felt acutely at each of the moments I described above, the people of Israel and the country of Israel feels unmoored. So many of the people that I interacted with expressed the feeling of floating in time, individually and all together as a country, as if the world is turning at a different pace than they are, and living in a different reality. They are in the wrong moment in time, they feel, in disbelief that they are still a generation of soldiers. And added to this feeling of disconnect is the devastating sense that Israel and its surrounding areas are losing and will ultimately be missing an entire generation that could have and should have been working toward a better future. To walk on Har Herzl today, the military cemetery, is to see rows and rows of fresh graves and groups of teenagers quietly crying next to them. So many Palestinian youth have been killed, wounded, or angrily disenfranchised by hateful statements of far, far right-wing politicians. And of course, to visit Otef Aza is to witness all over again the terribly young ages of the people brutally killed at the Nova Music Festival, the Kfar Aza Youth Village, Kibbutz Nir Oz, and Kibbutz Be'eri. Hundreds of young men and women aged 18 to 35 in particular. And underneath the turning, a regular life that feels slightly out of sync and feels empty of a particular group of people, exists these existential questions. They are always quietly humming. Where are we going? When are we finally going to get there, and who is going to lead us there? These questions are always there, deepening the sorrow of the hard times, adding poignance and perspective to moments of joy, and just hanging alongside the mundane tasks of everyday life. What can possibly come next, you think, when you are standing there? When so many things seem so broken, when grief, personal grief, political grief, and peoplehood grief, when grief pervades, what can this country do? What can we do? And what can we do together? Since surely, as we have seen over this past year, as a blessing and a challenge. In the paraphrased words of another great Israeli poet, Zelda, our peace is tied by a thread to theirs. In other words, our fates are deeply intertwined. So where do we go from here? There is a concept in Jewish tradition that tells us that all revelation begins with heartbreak. All revelation begins with heartbreak. Throughout our Jewish tradition, from famous philosophers like Maimonides to feminist Jewish thinkers to new and innovative Jewish queer theorists, there is a notion that real revelation, world-changing, people-changing breakthroughs of understanding come first from total heartbreak. The realization that what is now simply cannot be the entirety of truth. Revelation comes from the walls crumbling down inside. Now, the heartbreak is definitely here for each of us, for all of us, and for so many reasons. The cracks are strong and deep and will surely be lasting. But on every day of the last 5 weeks, I also saw small hints that revelation, realization, inspiration, determination, and hope, that they are beginning to seep through the heartbreak. Bereft as Rachel Pollen Goldberg is, she could still stand in front of the room and say, hope is an action that we must do every single day. And then ask us, all of us, to send emails to the White House every day, begging that hostages be released and prioritized. Rana Fahum, who shared her anger, also shared essays by Palestinian teenagers who are saying, we are ready. We want to be the next generation. We want to be the people who lead together and get us out of this mess. The young woman from the concert who couldn't finish reading her poem, who finished her army service and has not yet been called up for reserves, she and her friends voluntarily went to all of the places where people from the kibbutzim, from the south and from the north, have been displaced and have been volunteering there since October 8th. They are particularly spending time in a place called Shuva Junction, or Shuva Achim. 3 brothers who on the day of October 7th saw the numbers of soldiers, realized that they had to help, and took out all of the food they had in their house, put it on tables on the road where everyone was fighting, and haven't stopped since that day. They now serve 3,000 meals a day to soldiers who come back 5 minutes from the Gaza border and eat for free, and they have a huge warehouse of everything someone could want. T-shirts and flip-flops and toothpaste and anything a soldier could ask for. And at the protests, even though there is so much anger and hurt and urgency and fury, every single protest ends with the singing of Hatikva. They have not discarded national hope. They have reclaimed the actual anthem of hope. They want a way forward. So what can we do? We can send emails every day to the White House and remind them that it is crucial that we prioritize the hostages. We can donate supplies to Shuva Junction and help people who are in desperate need at this moment find some comfort in their lives. And we can continue to support the Israeli reform movement, which is the underbelly of so much of what is happening in Israel. They are the anchor, and they are the organization, and they are advocating for our values every single day. I have learned so much over the last 5 weeks, and I can't wait to share it with all of you in so many ways over this next year. But right now, as I got off the plane at 8:30 this morning, I am just holding that all revelation comes from heartbreak. And I have to admit that amidst the deep beauty of being there was heartbreak. But I hope that together we can work toward revelation. Shabbat Shalom.